Hey, good evening, Mariner Student Ministries. I'm excited to be back with you guys. I'm excited to continue this series that we've been going through, just working through doubt. And I believe it's something that many of us, I know I've experienced doubt. Maybe you're in the middle of some doubts. And so I'm excited that we can kind of go through how doubts and faith work together and what the Bible has to say about all of that. I'm excited. If you haven't yet done so, make sure to open an account, a free account with Right Now Media, as for our Tuesday night study. Not this coming Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, we're going to start an online Bible study, and we'll use one of those Bible studies from Right Now Media. So make sure to sign up for a free account. I sent a link out into your text messages last week. I'll do it again this week just to remind you if you haven't yet done so. I'm excited about that. But tonight we're going to jump in, and we're looking at week 3 of our series of Doubt It, and just looking what that's all about. Why don't we start with a word of prayer? Heavenly Father God, just want to thank you for letting us come and be together, Lord. Thank you that we can open up your word, that we can learn from others in your word. We can learn from each other, Lord, but we can learn not just about you, but we can learn how to navigate this life, to live it with you and according to how you would want us to live this life, Lord. And Lord, just help us to grow, help us to be open to hearing what you have to say tonight. Help it to just be your words talking to these students. Help me to step out of the way. Let it be for them and you to do some business with you tonight, Lord. We love you. Thank you so much for loving us first. In your name I pray. Amen. So we're jumping back into this idea of doubt, and one of the things that we wanted to talk about this week, and this will kind of set this up, but there's a movie that I watched with my kids once, and it actually was a book. It's a book first, but then it became a movie, and the book is called Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. And if I don't necessarily endorse the movie, there's some not great parts in it, but you get the gist of what the movie's about based on just the title. That this kid, Alexander, one thing after another, if it's gonna go wrong, if there's a possibility of it going wrong, it went wrong all in one day for him. And maybe, I think a lot of people like that book and movie because maybe you've had days like that. Maybe you're having a day like that today. I don't know, maybe you've had a week like that. And I think many of us can relate to that. We're gonna try a little activity. I have no way of telling if you're gonna do it or not, but I wanna encourage you to. Let's just get the feet moving a bit, okay? So I'm gonna have you stand up wherever you're watching this at. And I want you to go to the back of the room of wherever you are. And hopefully you can still hear me as I go through this. This is a game called Never Have I Ever. And I'm going to read a statement. And if you're the opposite of it, you'll take a step forward. But if it applies to you, you stay where you are. So let me give you the first one. If you have never experienced disappointment, step forward. Okay? Second one. If you have never experienced things going badly, step forward. Okay, well, let's jump to the third one. If you've never been rejected, you take a step forward. Next one. If you have never lost something valuable or precious, take a step forward. Next one. If you've never lost out to someone else on something, take a step forward. How about this one? If you have never experienced sadness, go ahead, take a step forward. How about this? If you have always had your prayers answered the way you've wanted them to be answered, take a step forward. I didn't move. Chances are most of you probably are still at the back wall. Clearly everyone has experienced some disappointment, some rejection, some unanswered prayers at some point. But here's one more question. Have you ever heard or thought that following Jesus would make everything in your life okay? Take a step forward. Maybe you took a step forward on that one, and maybe you didn't take a step forward on any of the other ones. You can go ahead and have a seat now. But we have all maybe thought that if I just follow Jesus, if I just follow the rules, if I do things that would please him, then he'll make my life turn out okay. There's this Bible verse. It's Romans chapter 8, verse 28, and it tells us, just in summary, in everything God works for our good. I'm going to come back to the verse and I'm going to read it in full, but that's basically the summary of it. But many people interpret that as, if I follow Jesus, everything's going to be all right. They take that verse of, in everything God works for the good, to say, oh, man, God will just take the problems away if I follow him. But we know from our own experience that isn't true. Even when we follow Jesus, we don't get everything we want. We still get hurt, and bad things still happen to us. So what do we do about that? Do I really believe that God answers prayer? What's the point if bad things are still going to happen? What's the point of following him? Shouldn't there be some benefits to this? These are all great questions. And we're going to take a look at a man in the Bible who could sum up, his life is the summary of this Alexander, no good, very bad day. And his name is Job. And we looked at this a few months ago, just a quick one lesson kind of thing. But we're going to take a look at some verses from the book of Job. And hopefully you can follow along with me. If not, it'll be on the screen as well. Job chapter 1. We're going to read just some little sections at a time, and then we'll summarize some. We're not going to read all of Job because it's like 40-something chapters, all right? So we're just going to read some chunks. But Job chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, here's what it says. There once was a man named Job who lived in the land of Uz. It sounds like the land of Oz. It's Uz, U-Z, okay? He was blameless, a man of complete integrity. He feared God and stayed away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 teams of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. He also had many servants. He was, in fact, the richest person in that entire area. Job's sons would take turns preparing feasts in their homes, and they would also invite their 3 sisters to celebrate with them. When these celebrations ended, sometimes after several days, Job would purify his children. He would get up early in the morning and offer a burnt offering for each of them. For Job said to himself, "Perhaps my children have sinned and have cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular practice. So just some quick things that we learn about Job just from the get-go. First thing we learned, Job was blameless and filled with integrity. I don't know about you, I can't claim this. I can't claim being blameless. Just ask my family. They can blame a lot of things on me. It says he was filled with integrity. What does that mean? Integrity simply is talking about that he was the same person whether people were around him or when he was in private. He was still the same person. What was that person? He was following after God. So it's saying he followed after God whether people were around or not. He wasn't trying to please people. Second thing we learn about Job, number 2, Job feared God and he went the other direction away from sin. So not only did he fear God, but that fear of God led him to go away from sin. You know, many times we, as Christians, we look for where the line of sin is and we try and get as close to that line as possible. Job didn't do that. He knew where the line of sin was and he turned his back on it to go the opposite way. What's the opposite way from that line of sin? That's towards Christ. That's towards God. So we see that he was living that way. Number 3, we see that he was the richest person around. It lists all of his flock, the sheep, the camels, the oxen, the donkeys. It says he has many servants that work for him. And then number 4, we see he had a great family. It said he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. It seems like they are grown and probably married and living in their own houses at this point. You know, they're throwing their own parties. So that's what we learn about Job from the first 5 verses. Let's take a look. We're going to take a look at a little bit of a bigger chunk now. What sets up the rest of the entire book of Job is found in just this next section. Job 1, starting in verse 6. One day the members of the heavenly court came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser, Satan, came with them. "Where have you come from?" the Lord asked Satan. Satan answered the Lord, "I have been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on." Then the Lord asked Satan, "Have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil." Satan replied to the Lord, "Yes, but Job has good reason to fear God. You have always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You have made him prosper in everything he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take away everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." "All right, you may test him," the Lord said to Satan. "Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically." So Satan left the Lord's presence. One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting at the oldest brother's house, a messenger arrived at Job's home with this news: "Your oxen were plowing, with the donkeys feeding beside them, when the Sabeans raided us. They stole all the animals and killed all the farmhands. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news: "The fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up your sheep and all the shepherds. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, a third messenger arrived with this news: "3 bands of Chaldean raiders have stolen your camels and killed your servants. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news: "Your sons and daughters were feasting in their oldest brother's home. Suddenly a powerful wind swept in from the wilderness and hit the house on all sides. The house collapsed and all your children are dead. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." Job stood up and tore his robe in grief. Then he shaved his head and fell to the ground to worship. He said, "I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord." In all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. Chapter 2, verse 1. One day the members of the heavenly court came again to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser Satan came with them. "Where have you come from?" the Lord asked Satan. Satan answered the Lord, "I have been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on." Then the Lord asked Satan, "Have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil. And he has maintained his integrity, even though you urged me to harm him without cause." Satan replied to the Lord, "Skin for skin. A man will give up everything he has to save his life. But reach out and take away his health, and he will surely curse you to your face." "All right, do with him as you please," the Lord said to Satan. "But spare his life." So Satan left the Lord's presence, and he struck Job with terrible boils from head to foot. Job scraped his skin with a piece of broken pottery as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, "Are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Curse God and die." But Job replied, "You talk like a foolish woman. Should we accept only good things from the hand of God and never anything bad?" So in all of this, Job said nothing wrong. We're going to stop there for a little bit. So, talk about a horrible day. Job just had the worst day ever. He lost everything. What do we see? What happened in this passage? Number one, God allowed Job to be tested. Job has been following him. He's been accused by Satan, and God actually brought up that Job is awesome. He loves Job, and Job's following him. And so God allows him to be tested. And number two, in one moment, Job lost his children. He lost many of his servants. He lost his means of income. He lost his family. Number three, what do we see that he did right after that? He continued to worship the Lord. In all of this, he still worshiped God. Then what do we see happen next in chapter 2? Number 4, Satan then caused him great physical pain. It says he allowed him to have boils all over his skin, and Job scraped them with a piece of glass. And just thinking about that makes me cringe and makes me uncomfortable. And just, the pain that he was in. And at the end of this, Job's wife even says, it's time to let this go. Just curse God and let him kill you. And Job says, no, I'm still going to follow him. Number 5, again, Job continued to follow the Lord. I'm not going to read a whole bunch of verses now. I'm just going to summarize. If you were to continue, Job chapter 3, just kind of a summary of this. After everything that he experienced, Job then cried out to God, asking why. All of chapter 3 is basically Job, kind of a prayer, kind of a crying out to God of just, God, why is this happening? Why? I've done my best to follow you, and I can't understand why you're allowing me to suffer. So what we learned from chapter 3, number 1, Job cried out to the Lord. He did have questions. He vocalized his questions. Number 2, he didn't understand why all of this was happening. There were no messages from the Lord giving him explanations at this time. He was just being faithful. He was just following the Lord, but it was a struggle. It was hard. He was asking God, why is this? I don't understand. Tell me why. Then through most of the book now, from chapters 4 through chapters 37, Job is visited by 3 friends who tried to comfort him through this pain. He's got these boils. He's lost everything. But after sitting with Job for a week, they decided that they had an answer to Job's questions about why all of this was happening to him. Except their answers are really bad. Their answers are offensive. Their answers are hurtful, actually. Here's what they told Job. So if you're following your notes, number 1, Job's friends thought they had all the answers to Job's problems. Number 2, here's what they said. Here's what they said the answers were. Number 2, this is your fault, Job. You must have done something. Number 2, they also said your kids deserved it too. They must have done something. Now, the third thing they said, God has a plan. There must be a plan in all of this. You just have to wait and see what it is. And while that may be true, that's not helpful or comforting when you're grieving the loss of your entire family. Last thing that they told him, number 5, they said, hey, be thankful. Be thankful. God must be disciplining you for something. Be grateful it's not worse. These are pretty terrible answers. Maybe you hear answers like this all the time. Maybe you've even without thinking about it, maybe you've said one of these answers to someone else. These friends of Job, they lectured him for a very long time. And Job finally stands up and tells him, hey, everything you've said has really been hurtful and offensive, and you're wrong. Because, he said, I haven't sinned against God. But even if I had, none of this would be deserving of the kind of suffering I'm experiencing. Job cries out in pain, and he's asking God to just end this suffering already because it's just too much. Then we get to Job chapter 38 through 41. And this is where God responds. Number one there, God responded. But let's see how he does respond. Watch this video.
But then in chapter 3, we find out how he's really feeling inside. He unleashes this poem that reveals this devastation. It's a long, elaborate curse on the day that he was born.
After this, some of Job's friends come to visit him to offer their help. And all of them are like, Job, you must have done something horribly wrong to deserve this. After all, we know God is just, and we know the world is ordered by God's justice and fairness, so you must be getting what you deserve.
And for the next 34 chapters, the friends and Job go back and forth in very dense Hebrew poetry. His friends keep speculating about why God might have sent such suffering, and they even start making up lists of hypothetical sins that Job must have committed. But after each accusation, Job defends his innocence.
And Job is innocent.
He is. He's also on an emotional roller coaster. At some moments, he's very confident that God is still wise and just.
Yeah, in other moments, he's doubting God's goodness.
He even comes to accuse God of being reckless, unfair, and corrupt. So by the end of the dialogue, Job demands that God come and explain himself in person, and God does so. He comes in the form of a great storm cloud.
Now, God doesn't give Job a direct answer. He doesn't tell Job about the conversation with the Satan.
Yeah, he does something very different. He takes Job on a virtual tour of the universe. He shows Job how grand the world is, and he asks him if he's even capable of running it or understanding it, just for a day. He shows Job how much detail there is in the world, things that we might see every day, but really don't understand at all. But God does. He knows it all intimately. He pays attention to the beauty and operations of the universe in ways that we haven't even imagined and in places that we will never see.
Then to conclude, God shows Job two wondrous beasts and brags about how great they are.
Yeah, they are dangerous. I mean, they would kill you without even thinking about it. And God says they're not evil. They're actually a part of his good world.
And then that's it. That's God's whole defense. It's kind of weird. I mean, what was this all about?
It seems to be this. From Job's point of view, it looks like God is not just. But God's perspective is infinitely bigger. He's dynamically interacting with a whole universe of complexity when he makes decisions. And this is what God calls his wisdom.
So Job asking God to defend himself is actually kind of absurd.
He couldn't comprehend this kind of complexity even if he wanted to.
So where does this leave us?
Well, it leaves Job in a place of humility. He never learned why he suffered, and yet he's able to live in peace and in the fear of the Lord.
So after all of that suffering, God really never answered Job's question still. Job wanted to know why so many terrible things had happened to him. God answered, but not in the way that Job expected. Number two, God reminded Job of who he was and who Job wasn't. Basically, God was like, have you forgotten that I'm God and you're not? Let's just compare. Remember, I'm God. And he explained and showed him all of these great things of why he's God. He said, I'm the creator of everything. I'm bigger, I'm greater, I'm more powerful, I'm kinder than you can ever imagine. Don't push it, basically, is kind of how that goes. And so number three, Job didn't get the answer he was looking for, but he did get an encounter with the creator of the universe. And that was enough for Job. That was enough for Job to be okay with not getting the answer to his questions. Number 4, it's hard to have faith when you're experiencing something difficult that you can't understand and you can't explain. And that's okay. It is difficult. And there are going to be things in this life that are difficult. Jesus even said, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. The point of Job's story is that it's okay to not always have all the answers, and it's okay to struggle through that. Just like we said a few weeks ago in week 1, here's a reminder. You're not alone in your questions. Job had a lot of questions for God too. That was number 5. Number 6, God doesn't shame us for our questions. That's what we looked at last time. He's not gonna shame you. He's not gonna punish you. God never condemned Job for asking why, because God understands our pain. And then just a reminder this week, number 7, our questions don't always get answered. That doesn't mean that God doesn't love us and that he doesn't care about us. But there are going to be some times when we're asking God why, and we don't get the answer that we're looking for. Maybe you've asked God a question that never got answered. Maybe you've asked God for something that you never received. Maybe other people have tried to comfort you during a time of tragedy, and it didn't turn out so well. Let's take a look again at that verse, Romans 8:28. At the end of number 1, at the end of Job's story, God does restore Job's life by giving him double of everything he had, but that doesn't take away the pain and suffering that Job experienced. Let's look at Romans 8:28 again. It says this, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. God can redeem what we've suffered and lost. When we experience pain and heartache, the hard truth is that our questions don't always get answered, but God can redeem what we've suffered and lost. He can restore our heart. He can restore your heart. And maybe you've had questions that have gone unanswered. And I want to encourage you, I'm in the same boat. You're not alone in that. And you're not the only one to have questions, and you're not the only one to cry out to God and not get an answer, but we do and can rest in the comfort knowing that God is in control and God loves you. We're going to stop here at this point, and we're going to jump into our Zoom for some discussion questions. I will see you guys there.